Cunningham. The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I give the call to the member for Wills.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It wasn't always the case that the Liberal Party was so hostile towards manufacturing in general and the car industry in particular, and you didn't used to get the sneering references to industry welfare and picking winners and so on that tend to mark the modern debate. Indeed, the founder of the Liberal Party, Sir Robert Menzies, said, and I go back to 1964 when he was opening the Chrysler Manufacturing Centre in Tonsley Park in South Australia, in the member for Wakefield's electorate. He said, I found myself as a Prime Minister greatly concerned to see whether we could establish an industry of building motor vehicles in Australia. And this was regarded by a lot of people with some horror, and we had all sorts of expert advice. Expert advice is the very devil. You want to have at least 100 experts and then conduct a Gallup poll amongst them and then think out the answer yourself. That's my firm belief. The experts said, "Oh, but you can't do it. Nobody could build a car in Australia." Well, it was only 25 years ago that was happening. I remember it very well. There were all sorts of misconceptions, there were all sorts of expressions and inferiority on the part of people, and today in Australia we have a state of affairs in which 400,000 new motor vehicles go on the road every year. That was Sir Robert Menzies back in 1964, a giant compared to some of the free market pygmies we deal with now. He continued, "I don't need to be told that there are quite a number of people here as I go around who are what we used to call new Australians, who are people who migrated here since the war. There are millions now, well anyhow something well over 1 million in Australia, and every large factory I go to contains a high percentage of people who've come in these years. There could not have been an immigration policy or program without employment on this scale in industries of this kind." He says, "The rural industries, vital as they are to the survival of Australia, can't employ people by the scores of thousands extra every year. We know they can't. It is industries of this kind which enable the migration program to continue, and the fact that the migration program continues, that you have remarkable increase in the population every year by year, has given strength and tone and optimism to the people who run retail stores in Australia, to all sorts of other manufacturers who produce things that are in demand by stores and which are bought by them because they are in demand by their ordinary customers. This is the whole interwoven structure." So that was Sir Robert Menzies, Deputy Speaker, saying you can't have migration without manufacturing. Now, this government is unravelling it, killing off manufacturing in general and the car industry in particular. And mark my words, this is not going to end well for Australia, this narrowing of our industry base, of our economic base. And another Liberal Prime Minister said as follows, Prime Minister Harold Holt, back in November 1967 at the inauguration of the Lonsdale plant of Chrysler in South Australia. He said, "This is a great moment in the history of this state and is a very welcome occasion in the history of industrial and economic growth in Australia. It is, I assure you, a stirring experience to go around the country as your Prime Minister and see in all parts of Australia, in one form or another, Australia's strength and industrial growth. In formally declaring this Lonsdale plant open, I convey to you on behalf of my colleagues and government my own personal good wishes, every wish that you will continue to prosper and that you will be a permanent element in a growing and increasingly prosperous Australian automotive industry." And that was Harold Holt. We also had former Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser in 1976 saying, "The motor vehicle industry is of great importance to Australia's national economy and particularly South Australia. The plans announced by Chrysler are not only important for the industry as a whole and for Australia, but they are also of special importance to South Australia, where motor vehicle manufacturing is obviously very significant for the industrial development of the state." Now we come forward to today's Prime Minister, who said on the 7th of September 2013, before he was elected, quote, "I want to see car making survive in this country, not just survive, but flourish." Then, surprise, surprise, in December, he decided to turn his back on our auto industry, turn his back on the car makers, turn his back on the 50,000 Australians employed in the sector, and then he said, "Some of them will find it difficult, but many of them will probably be liberated," his word, liberated, "to pursue new opportunities and get on with their lives." So this Liberal Prime Minister has seen the car industry vanish on his watch, and he should be ashamed that he's allowed this to happen when the previous Liberal Prime Ministers were strong supporters of it. Robert Menzies got it, Harold Holt got it, Malcolm Fraser got it. Deputy Speaker, the bill before the House amends the Automotive Transformation Scheme. That Act was established to encourage investment and innovation in the Australian automotive industry. It gives effect to the government's $500 million cut to the Automotive Transformation Scheme from 2014-15 to 2017-18, which was announced as part of the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. It also has the effect of terminating the Automotive Transformation Scheme on the 1st of January 2018, cutting a further $400 million from the Automotive Transformation Scheme, which was announced in the budget. Now, Labor strongly opposes this legislation. We think it spells disaster for the 200,000 Australian men and women who rely either directly or indirectly on the automotive manufacturing industry for their jobs. We think it's a disgrace that this government is seeking to bury the manufacturing industry as quickly as possible, and we think that this decision to withdraw support for the manufacturing sector through this bill, refusing to co-invest with Ford and Holden and Toyota in continuing to grow a high-skilled manufacturing base. You combine this with the increasingly preferred option to build Australia's next generation of submarines overseas. These things will damage our manufacturing industry and damage Australian companies and Australian workers. This at a time when Australia has high unemployment levels. We have a national unemployment rate of 6.1%, participation rate of 65.2%. My state of Victoria, our unemployment rate is 6.8%. Youth unemployment is the highest it has been for the last 15 years. We have high regional unemployment, high long-term unemployment, and yet we have a government which is abandoning manufacturing and thereby abandoning Australian job opportunities. Deputy Speaker, following the decision last year by Ford to close, I hosted a Wills Car Industry Forum in Fawkner with the intention of providing local businesses and employees with information and assistance. The decision by the Ford Motor Company to cease manufacturing in Australia in 2016 affects all Australians, but clearly very greatly those in the electorate of the member for Corio, who is here, but also local auto component manufacturers that supply parts to Ford, to the businesses, the local employees and their families in my electorate of Wills and the neighbouring electorate of Calwell. And I was very conscious at the time of the difficulties that Ford's decision would cause for some people in my electorate. The forum was an opportunity for people in Wills to share their views and concerns. Residents, employees and business who were affected by the closure attended. They expressed their views and concerns about the closure announcement. We had speakers from a wide range of agencies and companies, including Austrade. Many of the speakers administered or managed programs that could be of assistance to the car industry and our community. And one of the key aims of the forum was to ensure that all of my constituents are fully aware of the range of services that can help them through what are difficult times. Manufacturing is a critical industry sector for Melbourne's northern region, and it's vital that we work to proactively assist and create new opportunities for local businesses and employees as soon as possible to help support the manufacturing sector, local businesses, local jobs and maintain strong community and social fabric. This bill will hurt my community in terms of social cohesion, jobs, support for manufacturing industry, and making sure that suppliers and businesses have the time and have the support that they need to transition to new markets and products. And Deputy Speaker, I agree with the economist Danny Roderick, who says that countries ignore the health of their manufacturing industries at their peril. He says that high-tech services demand specialised skills and create few jobs, so their contribution to aggregate employment is bound to remain limited. Manufacturing, on the other hand, can absorb large numbers of workers with moderate skills, providing them with stable jobs and good benefits. For most countries, therefore, it remains a potent source of high-wage employment. Indeed, the manufacturing sector is also where the world's middle classes take shape and grow. Without a vibrant manufacturing base, societies tend to divide between rich and poor, those who have access to steady, well-paying jobs and those whose jobs are less secure and whose lives are more precarious. Danny Roderick says that in the United States, the fall of manufacturing's share of employment has been damaging to productivity because labour productivity is substantially higher in manufacturing than in the rest of the economy. The bulk of new employment in the United States has come in personal and social services, which is where the economy's less productive jobs are found. The migration of jobs down the productivity ladder has shaved 0.3 percentage points off US productivity growth every year since 1990. In Latin America, redundant workers have ended up in the worst performing activities such as informal services, causing economy-wide productivity to stagnate. And I want to add my voice to the concerns being expressed about the offshoring of Australian manufacturing. I agree with the economist Herman Daly, who says that offshoring production is not trade. No goods are traded, and it's absurd that offshoring should be defended in the name of free trade. Offshoring increases imports, increases the trade deficit, and lowers either employment or wages. Now, the policy of free trade is based on the doctrine of comparative advantage, and one of the premises on which the doctrine of comparative advantage rests is the international immobility of capital. But offshoring involves moving capital abroad, and if we were fair dinkum about free trade as a policy, we'd be looking at capital mobility and offshoring. The idea that manufacturing jobs are degrading and that everyone is going to be re-educated to become a mining engineer or an investment banker is delusional. Manufacturing jobs are worthwhile jobs, holding families together, holding communities together, and we should not let them slip away. The Nobel laureate Professor Robert Solow's growth model showed that the only way to break the bonds of steady-state stagnation is through rapid innovation and technological change that lifts the productivity of both capital and labour out of the steady state. R&D represents the seed corn of technological change and innovation. Deputy Speaker, regrettably, since coming to office, this government has gone out of its way to trash Australia's automotive capabilities. The government claims that the age of entitlement is over, but we have here a situation that welfare payments and lost tax revenue from an industry shutdown is projected to exceed $20 billion, I repeat $20 billion, and it will take more than 10 years before the economy recovers from the underlying hit to GDP. Now, the greatest impact from the wind down of the automotive industry will be in my home state of Victoria, where an estimated 100,000 jobs will be lost. And this is the state with the 15-year high youth unemployment rate at around 12%. Gross regional product in Adelaide and Melbourne will not recover until 2031, nearly 2 decades away, and employment levels are not expected to recover until the end of the 2020s. In addition to the losses estimated in Victoria, South Australia is projected to lose 24,000 jobs, and New South Wales and Queensland are expected to lose 30,000 jobs. So this is an industry which has been vital in my electorate and vital in Victoria and other parts of the country. I think it deserves better treatment than the treatment it has received from this government. I strongly oppose the bill. I wish that the government would reconsider its attitude towards manufacturing in general and automotive manufacturing in particular. Labor will do everything we can to stop these cuts to the Automotive Transformation Scheme, and we ask the crossbenchers and minor parties in the Senate to stand up for Australian jobs and block these cuts in the Senate.
I thank the member for Wills. The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I give the call to the member for Corio.